So she didn't inherit Grandpa's jawline, but there's no doubt she's family. It's your job to raise her, and it can be tough. Let's make it easier. With technology and automation, you can do more, like produce high-quality bales with way less effort. Built-in sensors can measure bale moisture and size, so you can monitor quality on the go and manage your fleet from your phone. Sit back and enjoy effortless operation. Discover an easier way to work.
Welcome to another edition of Cattle Chatter. Cattle Chatter, of course, is being powered by the folks over at John Deere. Turn your hay or silage into consistent, dense bales with the John Deere round balers. Precision features, integrated technology, and dependable performance that you can count on. Joining me today, Brad Kooima. He's with Kooima Kooima Varilek out of Sioux Center, Iowa. And what a day to record this show. As you and I are talking, the feeders are the leaders once again, and a market that is on fire. And I loved a statement that you said before we started this, Brad, is influence dominated by the feeder trade. But before we talk about that, I do have to mention pretty sharp looking attire you're wearing there today with the Cattle Chatter logo.
Yeah, I tell you what, a really good friend of mine was kind enough to send it to me. It came in the mail today. Thank you, Susan, and a very nice note along with it as well. Yeah, it's awesome. It feels great. And it feels like it should be worn. It finally feels like fall around here too, instead of it being so terribly hot. So yeah, I like it. I think I'll have it hanging in my office here. We can try to remember it for Thursdays, right?
There you go. Looks sharp. So let's talk about this influence that's being dominated.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Of course, I like doing this a lot with you. So January feeders. I'm just going to grab one of them here. January feeders are $24 higher than they were Friday morning. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, even in the kind of volatile market that we've become accustomed to here, that is still a lot, and another $5.50 higher today. So now anybody that's been to a sale barn, I think can relate to the fact that, there is some inherent, very real strength here in the cash feeder cattle trade. I've said on this program a number of times that that's the last place for true price discovery, right, is in the sale barn. We're going to find out what somebody's willing to pay for a set of cattle. So I think that that's part of the underlying power here that in the feeders. And I'm a little uncomfortable because you're almost getting this vibe from some of these people that are saying, well, feeder cattle there's just enough of them. They're never going to go down. They're never, whenever I hear somebody say this is never going to happen, or it's different this time, or some of those things that make me a little uncomfortable. These prices are past the old records by so far that we can't even see them in the rearview mirror anymore. And then, of course, the other part of the feeder cattle trade, Susan, is that whenever you need it here, every week or so, you get an injection of, we haven't heard anything about screwworm for a little while, so let's hear some story about that now. So that's in part of it, I think, too. I think, anyways,
So you brought up the new World Screwworm, and I thought it was interesting because it proof in the pudding that treating these cattle works, because that screwworm that they found was dead.
Amen. This isn't 1966,
right,
when we had it the last time and didn't know what to do about it, right? And again, the MO on this thing was very similar to the one a few weeks ago that got within 70 miles, where it comes on a load of cattle that's been transported all the way from just about Guatemala or somewhere down there, where they know they've got it all over. And it's almost like, we haven't heard anything for a while. Let's bring a load of cattle up here and see if we can't. I don't know. I don't want to sound like grassy knoll guy here, but I mean, I don't know, so, there's a couple of drugs that have been approved, Ectomax, Ivermec, cold weather. That's what surprises me about the deferred feeders. I guess I'm just kind of talking what I've been thinking here and been thinking wrong. I thought that maybe we were going to slow down the back months of these feeder cattle, and I've been dead wrong. But I guess I just got to say what my head tells me to say back there. Feeder cattle strength, and I think you can see that, and that translates into strength in the back end of the live cattle. That's just the way it works. Strong feeder cattle, then the back end of the live cattle go higher. But that is kind of a weird way to rally the market by the back end first, not normal. It's usually the bull spreads work. Usually the basis is different. I beat this to death, but when I started 45 years ago, somebody handed me a note and said, write this down: basis spreads, then the market. And what that commentary is that, well, when the basis changes, which it has, Futures are above cash in the north. And when the spreads weaken, which it has, the back months are stronger than the front, then the next thing maybe to weaken is the market. But that had nothing to do with the trade today, because this is a big bull market day where we made new contract highs on feeder cattle. And so, nobody should be talking about the negative things, except I guess I am anyway, because there's a few yellow flags here, blinking lights that are telling me, be careful. We might be incentivizing the producer now, because of the structure of the premium in the futures, to not sell what you got, have a holding action kind of a rally, which it feels like maybe that's what's going to happen in the cash. Only to have to pay a little bit of a price later on. So in the short term, feels pretty good. Although this cash cattle market, Susan, to borrow a phrase, it feels like we're all dressed up, ready to go. So now we better be higher on this cash cattle market this week. There was a little bit of light trade that developed just before I got on the program with you. Not large numbers, but a little bit of 231 trading in Iowa. There was 230 basically last Friday. I don't think 231 would meet up with market expectations, not as much as we've rallied already this week.
So 2 questions for you in the statement you made. First of all, do we really need bigger cattle at this point?
I would say yes. The packer's going to try to incentive that because of the overall tightness of supply. Not that the supply is so tight in the north, but it is very, very tight in Texas in particular because of the border being closed for this long. Right. So yes, I think the packer certainly is going to try to incentivize them to. I mean, beef production is a summary of numbers times weight. So if you can't get more numbers, we're going to have to get more weight. So I think that's a very real part of it, especially. And if you look at the regional weights, like we've talked about a number of times, it's the South that has the big increase over normal for what the regional weights have been doing.
So how much pressure is the cash going to have to continue to perform?
October went home at 235.02 today. We are under delivery. I figure it takes like $2 to $2.50 a hundred to go through the hassle and the shrink and the extra cost of making a delivery. So we really almost have to get this northern cash in that 232.3 slot, otherwise I would say that you'll get a sprinkle of deliveries. I am a little surprised that we haven't already, actually, and hey, that's the way the market's supposed to function. If that's your best bid, then that's the way the futures are supposed to function, right? So I'd say be a little careful because I would say the basis is enough that we might get a few deliveries here out of the north. We'll see.
Brazil and the 2 presidents had a conversation. How do you see that weighing in, and how's that going to affect the markets if they come up with some sort of tariff agreement?
It's a great question, and I'm glad you brought it up because when they had that initial phone call, everything went really good and it's going to be huge. And all right, sorry, I can't help but I always go into that deal. But they acted like the conversation went well, whatever that means. And they have agreed to meet again, this time on our home turf here. He's going to fly up, President of Brazil is, and meet with President Trump. So, everybody is, extrapolating that, well, maybe because he specifically asked to take that last 40% tariff off, President of Brazil did. So that's on the table. I thought that the futures market that day rallied partly because he didn't take it off. They just agreed to keep talking. So I think that there were some people that gave them a reason to be a little bit more friendly because we didn't see that. There's been a lot of pressure put on President Trump here to try to control the price of beef or to lower the price of beef, and even statements made by himself that, well, just wait, our policies are going to blah, 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 right? So it doesn't take too big of a reach here to think that, well, that would be a way to do it, to take that tariff back off and get a lot more grinding meat in here and help that to contribute to maybe softening up this hamburger ground beef market. I don't know. I guess to me, I'm guessing, of course, like always, but I would say that would happen sooner rather than later. I'm not exactly sure what he's waiting for in terms of, okay, they're doing what I want them to do now, because I'm not exactly sure what the reason for the tariff is, other than he was mad about the way they treated the ex-president. So I don't know how you undo that, but politics are messy.
So Going into a Friday trade and into the holiday weekend, going into the Friday trade of a weekend, what are you seeing that might influence what we see come Monday?
I feel like we've come in really hot, okay? And this cash market better live up to the expectations of what the futures market are. And I feel that way about the feeder cattle too. I mean, I don't care how bullish the news is. $24 in 4 days is unusual, right? I feel like we're very overbought. I would guess the market tomorrow, if I had to guess, it cash is going to be a little higher, but disappointingly so, not the 4 or 5 higher that the futures maybe are implying, and that the market might see a little bit of softness going in here. But we'll see. The market is, honestly, it's been stronger than I thought, and that I expected this week. So not always right, not even close.
But always a good conversation. Speaking of, best way for folks to get a hold of you?
You can check us out at kkbtrading.com, but we'd rather have you call 712-722-0023.
Well, thanks again, Brad Kooima, joining us for another edition of Cattle Chatter. Cattle Chatter, of course, is being powered by John Deere. So turn that hay or silage into consistent, dense bales with John Deere round balers. Precision features, integrated technology, and dependable performance that you can count on. And that is another edition of Cattle Chatter.
The views and opinions of this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers. There is substantial risk of loss in trading futures and options, which you should carefully consider prior to trading.